Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to build a personal brand that gets you noticed at the executive level. I'm your host, Laura, and we're going to keep this fast-paced, practical, and focused on what actually works, especially on LinkedIn. So let's start by meeting our speakers. We've got three brilliant guests with us today. First, I'll pass over to Justin McGuire to introduce himself.
Cheers, Laura. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin. I've built and scaled multiple businesses, run a global recruitment firm, and now I help founders grow lean, profitable companies through personal branding, automation, and offshoring.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. And hello, Helen. Please, can you introduce yourself for our audience?
Hello, Laura. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Helen McGuire. I've built and scaled two impact businesses over the last 10, 12 years whilst building our little family of 5 and moving around the world. I wrote a book about that experience called The Female Founder Formula, and I now support founders and leaders to create impactful influence.
Fabulous. And Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name's Sarah. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at MCG Talent, and I also work with founders globally to help build authentic personal brands that show themselves in the best light and get them the results that they want.
Fabulous. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. So I'm just going to start by running through a little bit of housekeeping. If you have to dash off, a recording will be available afterwards for all registrants. But if you do stay with us on the live, you'll be able to ask us questions using the chat function, and that will be in real time. So to do that, if you give your mouse a wiggle over the bottom of the screen, you'll see the chat box. Click it, pop your questions in there at any point during the webinar. Questions will be anonymous. Only myself and the panelists will see those questions. So please don't be shy, get them in. And to get us used to using that function, I'm going to begin by asking you a question and you can pop your answers in. So the question I will ask you today is, what is the number one thing you want to get out of today's webinar? Whilst you're putting your answers in, I'm going to cover the agenda. So first of all, we're going to look at nailing your LinkedIn profile. So that's going to be the first section. We're going to delve into it because that's something that everyone really struggles with. Next, we're going to look at what to post and how often. After that, building authentic influence. And then to finish off, a little quick fire round and then over to you for your questions. If there's time during the webinar, we will also have a little question break and answer some of those as well. So let's check out your answers. So people have said, improve my LinkedIn presence. Great, we're going to cover that. How to set yourself up to level up, how to stand out as a senior management candidate, all things that we're going to cover today. So super excited to hopefully answer all of these questions. If we don't answer anything though, please do pop it in. Okay, let's start with section 1, nailing your LinkedIn profile. Let's start with the foundations. It's often the first thing people check when they see your content, so it's worth making sure it actually reflects who you are and what you do. So what should go in your about section, Justin?
Okay, thanks, Laura. Guys, think about your about section like a trailer, not just a list of jobs that you've done, but a reason to actually care. So really, really make it personal. You're not just listing the jobs that you're doing, you're giving someone the reason and why behind them, okay? So you'll notice on mine, it opens from London creative agencies to Honduras classrooms to building businesses across continents. Actually, I walk through the journey and I walk through the shifts, what I've done, the real journey from the corporate world, rebuilding after a crash, launching and exiting companies, and also finish with clarity on what I do now and who I help. And that's your job here. You've got to put your story, your service, and your value in. And the truth is, your about section is probably the only thing people read. So it needs to land.
Okay, perfect. And Sarah, what makes a great headline on LinkedIn?
So I think one of the things that we see quite a lot when it comes to people's headlines is they just kind of put their job title in there. It's quite hard to stand out only having your job title. It doesn't say too much about what you can actually offer. So the framework that I would use, and we'll put this in the chat for everyone so that they can take it away, is I help who achieve what through method. So if I give you an example of what that looks like in practice, it could be something like, I help recruitment agencies grow their client base through targeted marketing. So that gives people a real understanding of what you do. It's a lot more influential than just saying, I'm a marketing manager. So it gives you some real insight into what that person can help you do. And we'll share that method with you in the chat as well so that you can take it away and work on your own.
Okay, perfect. I'm definitely going to go away and use that method myself. Helen, if someone listening only changes one thing to, sorry, wrong question, bear with me. What's the biggest mistake you see people making with their profile, Helen?
Oh God, I mean, where do you start with this really? There are so many issues, I think, on people's profiles. Look, I would say definitely just the key thing to take away here is to keep it as up to date as possible. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile picture actually looks like you. So when people meet you in real life, it's not kind of you from 10 years ago. I know it's quite tempting, but try and keep it as real as you can. Keep things updated. Make sure that the about section is not written in the third person. This is your profile. This is your channel. This is your space to shine. So write it from your own perspective. You're really missing a trick if you don't do that from the perspective of connection. And just make sure that you are as active as you can possibly be. There is, it was just flagged to me actually before this call, there is a section on LinkedIn on your profile where it shows your most recent activity. So make sure that's something that reflects you, that reflects your background, your aims, your professional capacity, rather than perhaps something you wouldn't necessarily want a future employer or a future client to be looking at as the first thing that they see about you. So just keep things as up to date as possible and keep posting. We're going to cover that as we go along, I think.
Yes, great advice. Thank you, Helen. Now the next question. If someone listening only changes one thing today, Justin, what should it be?
Okay, the main thing you got to change, guys, if you haven't done this already, is your headline. Okay, it's the single most visible part of your profile. On every post, comment, and search, your headline comes up. Okay, so don't say experienced leader, don't say founder at X. Simply say this: I help who achieve result via method. Okay, and I can share this with you afterwards. But I help, and put who there, achieve, and then put the result via which method. Okay, make it clear what you do and who it's for, or people will scroll straight past you.
Okay, perfect. And Sarah, I want to come to you on this question as well. What do you think someone should change if it's just one thing today?
Look, I think one trick that people miss a lot on their LinkedIn profile is using actual tangible data to really illustrate the impact that they've had, whether that's for an employer or for clients that they work with. So really give some tangible numbers. So like, if you raised profit, how much did you raise it by, whether that's a percentage or whether you give an actual number. I think it can really help illustrate your actual impact. And I think that a lot of people, when they're building their profile and their experience section out, miss that, but it can really help you stand out. So I would say go away and do that if you've not already done it.
Right, thank you. And Helen, I'm coming to you on this one as well. What should people change?
There are 1 billion people on LinkedIn, believe it or not. 95% of them are what I like to call LinkedIn lurkers. They kind of like to look, but they don't like to post. And I would argue that you're missing a huge opportunity if you don't get your voice out there, not just on LinkedIn, but on plenty of other channels as well. It really is your opportunity to own your narrative. It's your opportunity to connect with the right people, whoever they may be, for you, and it's your opportunity to tell your story in your own words and communicate that efficiently and effectively. So we'll definitely help you with some pointers on this webinar, but that's the first thing I would say everybody needs to do when this webinar finishes, is to get out there and post about what they've learned whilst watching this.
Okay, great advice. Thank you. Now, before we move on to the next section, if you have any questions about nailing your LinkedIn profile, get those into the chat box now. And we're going to move on to what to post and how often. So once your profile's sorted, the question becomes, what do I actually post? Let's dig into content and how to make it sustainable. Most people say, I don't know what to post. So what is your advice, Helen?
Look, I think most people face a level of imposter syndrome when it comes to this. And this really kind of fires off the back of my last answer. And one thing I would say about that is if you're feeling slightly hesitant or there is a sense of imposter syndrome, I would 100% applaud that. You are not making any progress in anything if you don't feel like you're slightly at the edges of your comfort zone. So that's the first thing to get over. Everybody feels like that. It's completely normal. Shouldn't stop you necessarily from doing anything. The second thing I would say is to have a strategy in place. And that's what a lot of people lack. They just kind of post and pray. So I have a 3-part strategy. Lots of people use lots of different ways of doing this, but the way that I usually explain it is something that I see. So thinking about it from a thought leadership point of view, whatever that is for you and your industry and your position. What I say, which is then talking about me, my background, who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. My kind of personal stories as well are in there. And then what I do, and that's very much about my businesses and how I help people. So you might consider things like testimonials or case studies, for example. You might even want to talk about this event, which is what I did this morning. And that's probably sort of 10 to 20% of what you need to post, because you don't want to be coming across as salesy all the time on LinkedIn. That's not the point. But you can reframe that in any way that you want. But you do need to understand that imposter syndrome is normal, number one, and that you need to have a strategy, number two, and then you need to go out and execute it.
Okay, brilliant. And Justin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think I'm just going to walk you guys through the system that I use to grow from like 40,000 followers over 100,000. Okay. And there's 5 key content types that I always stick to. All right. First of all, it's awareness. I make people aware. You know, I put posts out there. They're all about, they're light, they're relatable, they get reach, they're about the sectors that I work in, they're about me as a person, they're about the industries that I'm involved in, they're topical based on news, they're an awareness post. Okay. The other thing I do, and I do quite a lot of this, and people who follow me will know, is I do quite a few personal posts. Okay, so human moments that show me, the person behind the profile. And I think this is what makes me stand out as being unique, because there's no one else like me. You know, we are all our own species and beings. So personal posts, they are absolutely ones that really do pop off and do well. The third one, which is one a lot of people miss, and it really does get a lot of traction, this, and that is the educational post. So be it giving advice to people on how they want to get hired, or what employers are looking for, or what the market's looking like, what salaries are, etc. Educational posts, they are absolutely critical. If you're looking for a job and you're an expert within a sector as an executive, this is a great time to put through what you've learned, what you stand for. Okay. And then the fourth one is intellectual property. Okay, so I want to show people how I do things differently. So why working with me, why hiring me, what I do that's different from other operators. Okay, and then the fifth one is conversion. So how I actually do it, how we as a business actually do it, how I did the job. Okay, those are, and in that you've got to show proof points, you've got to show results, and you've got to show wins. Okay. And those are 5 key pillars that I use. So if you're in between roles, this really does show your value. Or if you're hiring, or if you're building, this shows your credibility. And if you're selling, this builds trust before you pitch.
Right, fabulous. Great advice. And Sarah, just to hang on to that topic of the core post types, can you give some examples of the core post types that you would recommend as well?
Look, I think Justin's absolutely nailed it there on the core post types. There's not too much more that I would add there. What I would say just on this subject is, you know, when I work with people kind of on their LinkedIn strategy, what I always tell them to do is think about themselves as a brand. So in the same way as you would kind of post as a brand, you need to think about what are the key things that I want to speak about and want to be known for. So I think that's really important when you're starting to post on LinkedIn as well. What do you want to be known for? How can your post help you be known for those things? And also, what are you passionate about? Because I think you need to come across that you're passionate about things. So I think if you can blend those 2 things together, it will really help you kind of map out, let's say, 3 to 5 different content pillars that you can consistently post about. And then if you're having a day where you're thinking, oh God, I'm not sure what I want to post today, go back to those 3 to 5 content pillars that you've already mapped out for yourself and come up with something under one of those different pillars. And that will help you really stay on track and be really consistent with the content that you're putting out there. Because also when it comes to building a personal brand, you want to stay in a niche, the same as you do with any other type of branding. So having those core content pillars laid out and consistently going back to them and posting about them will really help you garner your reputation in the industry that you want to be in.
Okay, super. Thank you. And now we've had this question come through a few times in the chat, and it's actually a question that we've got as well. So do you need to post every day to grow your brand? I'm going to start with you, Justin, on this one.
Yeah, I get this question a lot as well. I don't think you need to post every day, although I don't think you do, but you need to post with a plan. Okay. So 3 strong posts a week is more than enough if they're relevant, if they're useful, and if they're formatted properly. Now, the LinkedIn algorithm currently favors value-driven content, and you'll see a lot of that gets shared, and it actually remains live for some time now. And if you're using carousels, and infographics, it's proven that ×2 now impressions get brought to you if you're using those 2 formats. Okay, so well-structured storytelling and using those 2 different elements can really make an impact for you.
Interesting stats. And Helen, do you have anything to add to that? What's your opinion on whether people need to post every day to grow?
I have this directly from the LinkedIn Middle East team. The answer is no. And actually, it's not recommended to post every day, because you can start to kind of eat your own traffic. Once you post again the following day, if there's a post that's going really well for you, it can knock that one off in favor of the new one, which may not do quite as well, right? So no, you don't need to post every day. Post with a plan, yes. Don't post and pray, 100%. You need a strategy. Agree with both Sarah and Justin on that for sure. And I think if you can try to post a few times a week, one of my tips to any founders, executives I work with is to schedule your posts ahead of time, to use a tool like Buffer, for example, because I don't know about anybody else, but I do not always wake up LinkedIn ready at 7 a.m. With ideas in my head to post. I know, Justin, you are very good at that. I'm not. So for me, it's far easier when I'm in a flow, when I'm in the right frame of mind, when I'm tuned into kind of, what I want to say and how I want to say it, to create my posts in one go and then to schedule them out for the following week. And I use Buffer for that. There are other tools available. And if you don't want to post directly from Buffer, and there are some caveats around that, because the non-free version is the only version that will allow you to tag, for example. You're not necessarily there when it goes live, so you can't always share or comment. You could always create it in Buffer and then copy paste it into LinkedIn when you're ready to do it. So yeah, be prepared would be definitely one strategy that I use really successfully.
Okay, perfect. People are loving the "don't post and pray" quote, so I think we're going to see that this webinar. Okay, next question, and the last question for this section. Can you share an example of a post that performed well for you and why? And Helen, I know you've got a really interesting post for this one, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay, this is my best performing post ever, which it's a very sad tale, actually. I posted it a year ago. It was diversity, equity, and inclusion related. It was a football, reshared a kind of football clip. And that post, did it on a Saturday, randomly on a Saturday afternoon. It went completely viral. I think to date, it's got something like 12,000, 13,000 likes, got tons of comments. I got about 500 followers from it, blah, blah, blah. It's the worst post I ever posted, because none of the people that, like, I'm not saying none of them, but a lot of the people that liked it or those that engage with it are just not my target audience. So it completely sort of missed the mark for me. So what I would say is not necessarily, about best performing, worst performing posts. It's about engaging with people. It's about creating relationships with people. And that doesn't mean that you need a post that has 200, 300, 400 likes necessarily. It just needs to have the right people and capture the right attention, so that you can then start to have a conversation with those people and hopefully deplatform them in order to be able to move that conversation or that relationship forward. So yeah, a bit of a warning one there, sort of the opposite of probably what you were expecting.
Interesting. I love that story. And it just shows that, you can grow in followers, but if they're not the right target audience, then It's not necessarily maybe what you want. And Justin, can you share an example of a post that's performed particularly well for you and why?
Yeah, I'll happily give you two examples quickly, Laura. So one I did, which was I shared how we replaced 15 recruiters with 3, became more profitable by offshoring and using automation, and that absolutely popped off. Okay, and it worked. One, because it was honest. Second, because it was controversial, and third, I think it showed people a better way forward, and it gave people something to think about, and also people wanted to comment, and get involved in that discussion. So if you're in a market where headcount doesn't equal success anymore, it was really one with sort of across different service businesses, but really was quite topical with AI. The second one that I did, which was a personal one, was I shared about the tough side about living abroad. Okay, so I talked about some deaths in my family which I haven't been able to get back to. I talked about stuff that's gone on that you miss when you live abroad, and this one really popped off as well. I think a lot of people resonated with it, particularly those that are also living abroad or have lived abroad, right? And it showed a more personal side of me. So there's 2 examples that I can give you, and I think the reason that people respond to these is it's truth, it's lessons, and it's something that people can feel.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you both for sharing those posts that have performed really well. We are going to dip into a short Q&A because we have had a lot of questions coming in. So I want to get through some of those audience questions and try and answer as many as possible. A quick one. Yes, we are going to share the recording afterwards for anyone that does have to hop off because a few people have mentioned that. Okay, if there's any questions, panelists, that you would really like to answer that you've seen come through, feel free to chip in. But some that we haven't quite covered just yet is how long or short do you think a post should be? And we'll start with you, Justin, for this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't look the actual length of the post. I wouldn't get too carried away with it. I know sometimes I take up all the character spaces that you need. Other times I don't. It's actually what goes with it. I think is really important here. So the carousel, I mentioned carousels and infographics. They are real top performers right now. They get the most impressions. They get the most conversions. But also the hook. We haven't really spoken about the hook, and the hook that's getting probably the most attention right now is a format where you have a 2-sentence hook. Okay, so first line 65 characters and second line 45 characters. Follow that by a story or some insight, and that's the one the algorithm tends to be favoring right now.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So that's super interesting for me as well. And Helen, coming to you on this question, how long or short do you think a post should be? Anything to add?
I don't think there's any should about it, to be honest. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about authentic influence as we go through. This is about storytelling. A story generally needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. As we all know, there are books that are 2,000 pages long and there are books that are 60 pages long. It really is about sharing it from an authentic perspective. And sometimes that can take you, as Justin said, all of the characters, and sometimes that can be achieved in 6 lines. So there's no should on this one at all. It completely depends on the content and the topic that you're posting about.
Okay. This question has come from someone that we know quite well, and he mentioned that some posts do great while others have extremely low engagement, and it can be completely random. So how do we improve that engagement? Sarah, I'm going to come to you for this one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, to give my complete honest answer on it, sometimes the algorithm just doesn't go in your favor some days. So if you have a post that you were really excited about and thought was going to do really well, but it hasn't, then I wouldn't take that to heart. I think sometimes that just does happen with the changes that we see in the algorithm. I think what is really key is to keep on top of what the algorithm is favoring. So as Justin mentioned, at the moment, carousels, infographics are doing really well and getting better reach. One thing I would say as well is we've not spoke about this yet, and I don't know if it's on the agenda, so I'll mention it now just in case. Make sure that you are also engaging with other people's content on LinkedIn. If you're kind of finding that you're struggling a little bit to get some of your posts noticed, it can be because you're also not engaging with other people's posts. So in terms of kind of making sure that you're going to get people liking, engaging with you, commenting, you need to give something out as well. So I would make sure that you use LinkedIn as a networking platform, and that you're not just putting content out there and hoping that everyone's going to like and comment on your stuff, but you're not doing it to anyone else. So I think that's really key with making sure that you're getting engagement on your posts if that's something that you're concerned about. But yeah, stay on top of the algorithm, stay on top of using it as a networking platform, and hopefully you can avoid those situations happening.
Right. So
Laura,
okay.
quickly chip in there, just because I know from testing this myself and talking to other people who post a lot, right? So commenting daily, so 10 over 10 genuine comments can boost your reach by up to 50%. Okay, so that just proves the point that Sarah's mentioned there.
Yeah, you'll see now that you can also see your impressions on comments on LinkedIn. That again just shows you that the algorithm is massively favoring comments at the moment. So as Justin said, it's a really good way to boost your impressions and get more eyes on your profile too.
Okay, brilliant. Last question for this short Q&A, and it is a quick one. And anyone can answer this one, but is there an optimum time of the day to post to increase that reach on LinkedIn? I don't mind who answers. Shall we go for you, Justin?
I always choose 9 a.m. in the time zone that I am in. It's always most impactful. I've tried lots of other different times. If something comes up in my head, I sometimes go for it, but normally 9 a.m. I know other people that swear by lunchtime, 12:30 to 1:30, but for me, 9 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Morning is usually better for sure. But I would say watch what works for your audience as well. And if you have a global audience, try to pick something that's kind of an in-between time. So if I were to post, let's say at 6 a.m., it wouldn't work, or 7 a.m., it wouldn't work, because a lot of my audience is UK based. So I try and pick I normally go for about 10 a.m. That I know they're hopefully all awake.
Okay, brilliant. We are going to move on to the third section, and we've actually, interestingly, had a couple of people ask if we can do some profile audits. And I know that we have got a webinar coming up, not sure when, but sometime in the future. So look out for when we promote that, and you can get your profiles in to be considered to be reviewed by our panelists. So before we go down that road, let's move on to our next section, building authentic influence. So Helen, what does authentic influence mean to you?
This is one of my absolute favorite topics. I talk to people in rooms online with my founders all the time about this. I mean, arguably, my book is really focused on this, 260 pages of it. It's really about putting yourself across in a way that people can connect with. And I think one of the big questions that comes up a lot where this is concerned is around how much do you share? You know, how vulnerable do you need to be? Is LinkedIn turning into the next Facebook? My argument around that is that there's really two types of sharing, if you like. One is from a place of emotion, which will probably invoke more of an emotional response, which may be positive or negative, hard for you to contain or to predict that. The other way is to communicate from a place of retrospect, from a place of reflection that will help, yes, you to put your story across, but also help people to understand what you learned from that story, what lessons you took away, what things you would recommend for other people to do who are in a similar situation. That's how you start to build trust and connection with people, because it feels very authentic, but it also feels very helpful. And it helps to start a discussion rather than an emotional response. And you know, in my experience, in my view, that's the path to choose, particularly on a platform like LinkedIn. And we could talk about authentic influence from much more of a 360 perspective. But where LinkedIn is concerned, that's where I would start.
Okay, perfect. And if you want to know more, Helen shared the name of her book. We can put that in the chat. So give it a read. Justin, next question. Do you need to be super vulnerable to be seen as authentic?
I don't think you do. No, Laura. I think you just need to be real. Okay. You don't need to overshare. I see some people really overshare, and that's not what you need. You need to show that there's a human behind the headline. So if you've made mistakes, say so. If you've changed direction, explain why. people trust like more than perfection. Okay. If you're making yourself out to be the perfect person as well, people are just going to switch off. I'll give you an example. I posted about how I moved to Dubai, I lost my job when the market crashed, and how I had to start the business that I've got now from scratch. Okay. That not at all was a highlight reel. It was just reality of the situation that I faced. Okay. It showed resilience. It showed the moment that forced me to launch MCG Talent. And I think it connected because it wasn't polished and it was personal and it was true.
Right, great. And also how you came through the other side of it as well. So I love a good war story as well. I always read them to the end. I think they're so interesting. Sarah, what builds trust fastest on LinkedIn?
I mean, so I think a lot of the stuff that Helen and Justin have covered helps build trust fast on LinkedIn. I think another thing as well is just like make sure that people can see you. So get your face out there. If you can, get on some video and help people understand who you are. Don't hide behind like posts that don't really show you as a person. A good piece of advice that Justin gave me actually about LinkedIn is in a world where everyone's using ChatGPT to write very kind of generic posts, the way that you can stand out is by jumping on video and just being yourself. So I think if you can show people that it's, you know, a real person behind the profile, and as I said as well, make sure that you are building trust by giving interesting insights on other people's posts as well. That'll help people gravitate towards you and feel more trustful of you.
Right. This kind of leads into our next question as well about how you avoid sounding like everybody else. So Helen, I'm going to come to you for this one to start with, and then see if anyone's got anything to add.
It comes down to practice, really, I think. It comes down to finding your voice and using it. And whether that is, yes, on a video, if that's where you feel most comfortable, whether it's the written word, whether it's a carousel that you've designed. And there's only really one way of figuring that out, and that's to do it. You know, that's to repeatedly show up and give things a go and see what lands with people. I think anything too polished isn't a good shout. I would not recommend using ChatGPT. Things don't need to be 100% grammatically correct. You don't need all the right, but you know, it's just really obvious when ChatGPT is writing things for you on LinkedIn. So I would not recommend that. I would recommend trying to find your views, your voice, using some of the strategies that we've shared from a content perspective, from a post perspective, from engaging with other people, and sharing what you're about, what you're interested in.
Okay, and anything to add, Justin?
Yeah, look, I think you need to write how you talk. Okay. Don't write like it's a job ad or an annual report. Just get rid of any vagueness as well. Say something that's real, say something that's sharp, and say something that's specific. If you wouldn't say it to your friend, if you wouldn't say it to a peer, then don't put it on your LinkedIn profile. And the other thing I just want to talk about is this bombardment at the moment of ChatGPT comments that are coming through, and the bombardment of people speaking like ChatGPT. Okay, it's the actual platforms now don't promote that, so you're actually being penalized if you comment and write with ChatGPT. You'll probably notice that over time your engagement's going down because the platforms are really like penalizing this now, and they're working very hard to, because they promote authenticity. That's the whole. They want to boost content creators, and they don't really want to put much effort behind those that aren't really put much effort in. So you're going to be penalized for it if that's how you're going to be writing and promoting yourself as well.
Okay, and Sarah?
Yeah, I think, look, be yourself. That might feel a little bit scary, but at the end of the day, the way that you avoid sounding like everyone else is by being authentic to who you are. You will have a lot of things that have happened in your career that are very helpful to other people, whether those be people who are maybe, you know, aspiring to get to the position that you're in, or people that you can help, and how you can show case studies of how you've helped other people in similar positions. You have very unique experiences, so don't be afraid to share those with people, and that will really help you stand out as the individual that you are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for your advice on that topic. We are going to run to a quick fire round, and then we're going to head over to a Q&A where everybody in the audience can get their questions in, and we're going to try and get through as many as we can. Now, we've kind of flown through these questions, which is good for you in the audience because it gives you lots of time to get your questions answered. But just before that, let's go to our quick fire. Helen, one word that sums up a strong personal brand.
Genuine.
Okay. And Justin, one small tweet that makes a big difference to a LinkedIn profile.
Use your featured section properly on this. Add a call to action, a link to the work that you've done, your services, or a downloadable piece that showcases what you do. That there is prime real estate, and most people leave it empty. So jump on that.
Amazing. And Sarah, best advice you've ever received about personal branding?
Be consistent, both in the amount that you post and keeping going with it, and in the message that you're putting across. Your first 5 posts might absolutely flop, and that's okay. You can't become a superstar overnight all the time, so be consistent, keep posting, and eventually you will start to see those little shoots of green of things doing well. And then, as I said earlier, be also consistent in the topics that you post about.
I liked that analogy of the shoots of green. Now let's run to our audience Q&A. We've got lots of time to answer your questions, so make sure you continue getting those in. And to my panelists, if you've seen any questions that you really want to answer that I don't ask, please do chip in. Now, I'm going to start with a question about the algorithm because somebody mentioned that we've talked about that quite a few times. How critical is this in the success of a good or bad post? And if so, how do you understand what the algorithm is focusing on at the moment? Does anybody really want to answer this question first?
Yeah, I'll happily go with it. Look, there's a lot of people that say, you know, just post, be authentic, be yourself, and don't play to the algorithm. And look, I get that, right? And I get why you'd say it. But the reality is that is the game. And if you don't play to the rules of the game, you're not going to get noticed. So, and the algorithm changes quite frequently. People post about it. LinkedIn actually tell you how they're changing it as well. Or there's a lot of people who really share quite consistently and regularly and study it, and they give you feedback from it. So the bits that I can tell you how it is, and I've shared them before, but I'm going to say it again. Carousels and infographics are top performers. Make sure you get a 2-line hook through, okay? Engagement matters more than ever. So 10+ word comments from real people massively increase your visibility. If you're just getting chat GPT nonsense in comments, that's not going to really help push you up. Genuine interaction, so you commenting on 10 to 30 posts daily, that can increase your reach by up to 50%. Avoid at all cost AI engagement activity. Be platform specific about the content that you produce. Okay, so what goes viral on LinkedIn won't go viral on other platforms. So always remember that as well. And value first content. The algorithm hugely favors those that offer value, that show you, you know, if you're in a job, or if you're looking for a job, tell people what you did, tell people how you grew in a business, tell people who you are and what you do. Don't feel like you need to hold on to trade secrets. Give out value there. If you give out value, the algorithm will be behind you. Polls are weaker, videos are good, and carousels and cheat sheets are the king.
Okay, so carousels, videos, polls not so great. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody got anything else to add about that algorithm question?
I think just that it changes frequently, and it changes more than you would like it to, and they don't tell you this stuff. So if you're really interested, then you need to do your own digging, your own research on it, and figure it out. And also just kind of watch what other people are doing, watch what's working for them, watch what content types are working. You know, be quite forensic about it. Look at how they've written, look at how they've, what type of media they're using. Is it them? Is it their office? Is it a carousel of images? What is it that they're doing that's working? And, you know, learn from other people. I think we should all be learning all the time. That is the nature of this type of work, to be honest, that we're all looking to improve and learn all the time. So yeah, there is never going to be one 100% perfect answer on this, because it will change and you need to evolve with it.
Right. Sarah, anything to add?
No, I agree very much with Helen on that point around kind of you can quite easily, if you start to analyze it, see what is doing well by the posts that are frequently kind of popping up on your feed and getting a lot of engagement. So take note of what you're seeing a lot and what kind of posts are doing well. And don't copy them, but take some inspiration from them, and that'll help you.
Interesting. I have been seeing a lot of carousels recently on my feed, so super interesting. Now a question about hashtags. Are hashtags still relevant? And if so, how can we use them well?
No, they're not. They're gone. Don't use them.
Hashtags are dead.
Definitely don't use more than 3. I mean, when you see, it's on Instagram, when you see people using 20 hashtags on LinkedIn, like it's just massively off-putting. And again, like look at what other people are doing in terms of those formats, in terms of those templates. The majority of really high-performing posts don't have 20 hashtags attached to them. I just don't think it's a thing on LinkedIn at the moment.
But both LinkedIn and in Meta have announced that the hashtag's dead. So don't use them.
Okay, answers that question. And in terms of the hook, because we mentioned the hook earlier and we mentioned the word count as well, how does someone know if their hook is a good hook?
People engaging with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how does it feel when you read it, right? What I get hit with quite a lot, both on LinkedIn and Instagram, is people who offer you 200 hooks to download, and it's $37 or whatever it is. I don't know. Like, don't do that. That's someone else's style. That's someone else's approach. Copy pasting that is not necessarily going to work for you. You need to test. You need to give this a go and think, if I saw that in the first top 2 lines of my LinkedIn feed, would I stop and read the post further? I get kind of the word count and everything else, and I completely understand that 2-sentence formula, but equally that's not a given. That's not necessarily going to work for you if you just count those characters. It's got to say something to your audience about what the post is going to help them with. That's what you need to try and capture in that hook.
Yeah, interesting.
I think
Sarah?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, the way that I kind of like to think about it is you're competing against a lot of people for airtime and views on your post. So it needs to be enough to make someone want to stop and pay attention. And in the world that we're in, there's so much like marketing that goes on. If you read your own first line, would it make you want to continue reading? So I think audit your own content, like that's really important. Take a second look at it, think, can I improve this? Make it make it like force someone into stopping scrolling. Like that's the goal of a hook.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, fabulous. Now this person raised an interesting question, and it's come through from multiple people in different words, but how do you shift the narrative of your profile if you're looking to switch careers? I don't mind this
You
first.
be authentic and tell your story. Okay. So I see that there's a guy, Zaid is asking as well, is the purpose to get more followers and comments on LinkedIn or to help job seekers? And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to help you get noticed. And you get noticed by being authentic. And if you've had to change careers, if you want to change it, you've got to tell your story. If there's one thing you can take from today, it's how you have to tell your story. Now, as recruiters, I own a recruitment business, and I know many people in the HR and recruitment business industries. Your LinkedIn profile now is studied by potential employers. How you interact, what you do, what your thoughts and opinions are. It's all, if it's good, it gives you a competitive advantage over others. And what we're doing today, if you're job seeking, is we're telling you how the content that you put out, being your authentic self, actually gets you ahead of others. Actually, stops people just looking at a CV and makes them concentrate and think more about you as an individual and as a human. And that is the main and important thing here today, is your personal brand puts you ahead of everyone else, because it's you. No one else can be you. Okay. And that's the whole point of doing this. It's not about farming likes and impressions. It's all about how you get noticed.
Own your narrative. Okay. Anything to add, Helen and Sarah, to that question?
I think it's the same as personal branding. It's the same principles as branding and marketing. It's all about staying top of mind. So just to add on to what Justin said, it's, you know, in the Middle East especially, we're in such a competitive job market. So if you're looking at this discussion through the lens of a job seeker, how can you be the person that someone thinks of when a new role opens up? There's the hidden job market in the UAE. They estimate that around 80 to 90% of jobs never get advertised because there's a network of people who know people who can go straight into interview for that job advert. So by building your personal brand and getting in front of the people who you want to be in front of, you put yourself in the position to be top of mind when someone is hiring. So you're putting yourself in a much stronger position as a job seeker if you follow this advice and kind of build your own personal brand and profile. It's a real competitive advantage, especially in the Middle East.
Thank you. Helen?
I would just add here that really the purpose of this, to to the point around, are we doing this just to boost our egos and get some more followers and likes and what have you? No, we're doing it to build trust. And actually, when I talk to, whether it's prospects, whether it's potential clients, whether it's founders that might want to work with me, whatever it is, the first place I refer them to is my LinkedIn, because it's all there. My LinkedIn, as I said, is a bit like a diary of the last 10 years or so. You can literally see my story. You can check out the content that I've created, the things that I've engaged with, the people that are in my network. And it's just tick, 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 and that's what it should be for you. This is a massive opportunity these days for you to own that. We're not waiting for TV channels or radio stations to knock on our door anymore. You are your own TV channel and radio station. And if you're not owning that, then really you're missing out on a huge opportunity, whether you're looking for a job, whether you're looking to build your business, whatever it may be. That's really what it's about. And the other thing I just wanted to add that we haven't really touched on is that LinkedIn is often seen as a marketing platform. It's actually much more of a sales platform. If you're only doing this from, the perspective of posting content, but you're not connecting with people, as Sarah says, if you're not following up on people who have liked and commented on what you're doing, if you're not going to other people's profiles and connecting with them, then you're really only doing half the job. It's a bit like going fishing and not reeling in the fish when you've caught something at the end of your line. So just make sure that is going full circle for you, because that's where the magic is. That's where you start to convert things.
Right. I loved the Be Your Own TV show and radio. We've had a couple of questions about tagging. So I just want to touch upon that because it's not something that we've talked about. But what are your views on tagging people in posts that are not directly linked to the post? So when people tag at the end, possibly people that work with them or connections, does it help or does it hinder?
If they're not relevant, if they're not, I get tagged loads in other people's posts, and I don't even know who it is, and I don't even know, like, they talk about a moment in time, and I wasn't there. So if they're relevant, tag people. If, like, I've tagged Helen and Sarah when I promoted the webinar today because we're doing this together. But if you don't tag people just because you think they might like and share it, people find it quite annoying, and it's very easy to untag yourself. So there's two different ways of doing it.
Okay. Yes, I can imagine that clogging up your notification box. I mean, it doesn't happen to me very often, but I can imagine that it could be quite frustrating.
It's weird. It's just weird. It's just kind of like, huh? Like who, it's making out that it's sort of piggybacking, and it's just a bit kind of, it's inauthentic. That's what I would say.
Okay. And the whole theme, I'd say, is authenticity for this webinar. So
yeah,
advice is don't tag them if they're not relevant or you don't know them. Yeah. Sarah, agreed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only instance where it makes sense to do it is if that person has maybe shared, their idea on a subject and you want to give them credit for that's where you first saw this idea, or maybe that person has a really good framework that you want to reference. I think if you have taken inspiration from a person or they've said something or shared something that is motivational to you, then maybe you can tag them. But if they've got no kind of bearing on what the post is about, then as Justin and Helen said, it doesn't make sense. But if they've inspired you in some way, I think that's the only way that it makes sense to do it.
Okay, so it doesn't make sense and it's also a bit odd. So in terms of social platforms as well, do you feel that Instagram, Facebook, and X have a place in the working world, or should you go all in on LinkedIn? Helen, you're nodding. Let's start with you.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I have a link tree. I think it has like 4 or 5 different platforms. I use Substack, I use Instagram, I use YouTube, I use LinkedIn. I don't use X because it's not super active here actually in the Middle East. But you have, I think Justin touched on this earlier, you have to create content that's relevant for each. It doesn't mean to say you can't repeat the same topics or the same approaches, but you will have to tweak the way in which that's delivered, both from a copy perspective as well as from a media perspective. So you can't just kind of expect one thing to work across all mediums. I would also say that if you're just starting out, pick 1, maybe 2 key platforms. And if you are in the B2B space, then LinkedIn and YouTube is going to be your best bet. If you're in the B2C space, then I would more towards Instagram and Facebook, maybe, although LinkedIn is still a pretty good shout. So pick the ones that you're most comfortable with. Not everyone is super comfortable with YouTube because obviously it's video. So yeah, it's about being as specific as you can be. But yeah, they all have a place in the ecosystem. And that's just online. We're not even talked about offline yet.
Okay. Anyone got anything to add on the online topic?
Gary V says B2B, LinkedIn, B2C, TikTok. It's where you're going to get the biggest numbers in his latest speech. So, and I had someone on the podcast yesterday who's doing exactly that and blowing up on both platforms, but you need to take a different strategy, okay, for both. And one certainly doesn't carry for the other. Go all in. For you guys looking for jobs or you looking to do sales, which I think the bulk of the people are on here, go all in on LinkedIn. It's be your best return of investment.
All right, Sarah?
Yeah, I would just say it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier. What is your strategy? Why are you doing this? And then that will help dictate what platforms you should be using. If you're a job seeker, obviously LinkedIn is going to be far superior to help you find a job than maybe posting on Instagram. So think about why are you doing it, and then what platforms are going to help you be able to achieve that goal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. A question that we had earlier in the chat, and something that we have answered before, but just to reiterate this for our audience, is it a good thing for a senior management position to have open to work on their profile?
Do you mean the green banner?
Yeah, the green banner.
Look, I can't say it's detrimental. I know some people feel it is. For us in our business, it's not. There is 2 ways. There's the subtle way where recruiters are aware of it, or there's the green banner. I think what we're talking about here today is, if you are open to work and the content that you're putting out is authentic, it's genuine, it's getting noticed, it's showing how you are different from others, it's telling your story, then you're going to get noticed with or without a banner. Okay. So yes, if you're looking for a job, put it on, but also make sure you back it up with a great piece of content and really put forward your personal brand as we talked about today.
Okay, great. All in agreement on that one? Anything to add? Okay.
No.
Right, we're going to do one more question. And it's hard actually to pick one. So I'm going to ask you as the panelist if you've seen any questions that you'd really like to get an answer in there for, or something that you feel we haven't quite touched upon and would like to touch upon. So because there's not much time, I wanted to hand that over to you guys. Justin.
I saw what someone asked a question. It was a recruiter who said, I prefer it when people just put the job title they work in and the company they work in their title. You've got enough characters to tell people who you are, who you serve, and what you're about, as well as what your company and job title is. So I don't mind if you integrate it, but just keep in mind that doesn't really say much about who you are as an individual. It's got the company and the job title. Okay, so that's your time to really show who you are as a person.
Okay. Yeah. Sarah, you look deep in thought over there. Have you got a question that you'd really like to answer, or do you think that we've covered everything?
I'm just reading through the many questions that we've had to try and make sure that we've answered them all. I see someone has said here, I've been trying to be in stealth mode in my job hunting, but I think that's been quite limiting. I know the moment I become more transparent, my whole industry would know that I would be in trouble with my current company. What is your advice here? So I would say, look, it's completely dependent on the person in that situation, but I think that your LinkedIn, it's very important. Maybe if you feel uncomfortable posting, just make sure that everything that we spoke about at the beginning of this webinar around your profile is kind of up to date. There's also, as Justin mentioned, something in the background of LinkedIn that lets only recruiters see that you're open to work. So I think that that's something that can be quite helpful. Make sure your experience is up to date and that your job titles match and that everything is aligned. Just make sure that you've done as much as you possibly can to make your profile stand out if you're not comfortable posting. But try and post if you can.
Post. And Helen, anything that you think we haven't quite covered?
There's a couple of things. There's definitely quite a few questions around, do you offer audits on this stuff? The answer obviously is yes. I mean, I think we mentioned we're going to be doing a session on that at some point as well, but yes, from that perspective. The other one here is something that I was literally talking about in a meeting just before I jumped onto this webinar. Should you link to articles on Substack, or is it better to put articles into the LinkedIn article format? We haven't discussed LinkedIn articles and newsletters. They used to be a massive thing. And I think even if you start one today, you'll get lots of followers. My question is why? I think the idea very much with a newsletter is that you want to own that audience. And what you need to remember is that LinkedIn is not an owned audience. It's essentially a borrowed audience. So what you want to try and do with LinkedIn versus Substack, if you can, if you're already writing a LinkedIn newsletter, or a longer piece, longer article, then break it halfway, maybe a third of the way through, and link out to your Substack, because that's where you're going to push people in terms of capturing their details, their email, and where you can have a bit more of a conversation with them from there, and perhaps push them through a different kind of funnel if that's your aim. So that would be my advice on the LinkedIn Substack question, which I think came from Sandra.
Yes, that was earlier on in the webinar, and thank you. I feel like I have learned a lot during this webinar, and I hope you as the audience have as well. We are going to have to end it there with only 2 minutes to go and say our thank yous. Now, a lot of people have asked about LinkedIn audits and if we offer it as a service. So we will be in touch about that after the webinar. And we will also mentioned earlier that we'd do a more general one sometime in the future. So we'll be in touch if you're interested in personal branding services and LinkedIn audit services. Look out for our email that's coming. Now, I'd like to thank Justin, first of all, for sharing his advice.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. It's always great to be here. I always have lots of fun.
Yes, and Sarah, thank you as well for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining us and sharing all your questions. It's been a lot of fun.
It has been fun. And Helen, thank you very much as well for joining us today.
Super welcome. I feel like I talk about this stuff in my sleep. So yeah, happy to show up and talk about it while I'm awake as well.
I love it. Now, if people do want to get in contact with you, what's the best way? Let's start with you, Justin.
Guys, LinkedIn's, if you see me, you've normally seen me around on LinkedIn a lot. So LinkedIn is the best way. Drop me a message and I'll aim to get back to you.
Perfect. Sarah?
Same. I mean, we've spoke about LinkedIn this whole webinar, so you'll definitely find me on there. So connect with me, send me a message, and I look forward to getting a lot of connection requests, hopefully off the back of this, and sharing insights further with you guys.
And Helen, same?
Exactly the same. And if none of us reply, then you know we've been talking nonsense for the last hour, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.